With this guitar lesson for beginners, we'll take the first step to playing songs on guitar by learning how to play basic chord shapes, along with chord diagrams and a PDF lesson plan. We're covering it all with the step-by-step approach. Learning how to play chords is an essential for every guitarist, and even though there are dozens of chords to work on, for a beginner you only need to learn several chord shapes in order to be able to play some basic guitar songs. And that's what we're going to focus on with this lesson. We're going to work on 5 basic chord shapes, most often used chords that you'll hear in most styles of music. We'll start by learning how to play a basic D chord, and here's the objective. We want to get 4 clear-sounding notes or strings from that D chord. And we're going to break down how to do this, 1 string and 1 finger at a time. And before we do that, a couple of basics to go over. One is the fretting hand. The fretting hand is going to be the primary focus of this lesson. For most of us, that's going to be the left hand, since most guitarists are right-handed. So the left hand is the fretting hand, while the right hand is considered the strumming or the plucking hand. Second, we want to review how to read a chord diagram, because as I'm showing you how to play it, we'll have this diagram appear on the screen as a visual aid. Now, a chord diagram is basically an aerial view of the fretboard. You'll have the 6th bottom string being on the far left and the 1st top string being on the far right. And the finger numbers to fret with, they're shown in the black circles. You have lines going across to represent the frets, and that thick black line on top represents the nut or the open fret position. If you have an X above a string, that means the string is not played, while the O above each string means the string is played open or not fretted. So with that, let's go to the next clip now, where we're going to break down this D chord 1 string at a time. The first note in a D chord will be the 4th string, and it won't be fretted. It'll be played open. So that should be easy enough right there. But we do want to play it a couple times, get the hang of that first note, how it sounds. Second note, we're going to place our first finger on the 3rd string 2nd fret. And we want to play that individual note first. Make sure you get that note to ring or sustain. Now, a couple tips as far as getting that clarity from that note. With the fretting hand, you want your fingers to be as close to the fret as possible without actually touching the fret. So if you're on the fret like I'm doing now, that string, that note will be partially muted. Same goes if you're not close enough. If you tend to, a lot of beginners, their fingers tend to wander a little bit. If you kind of go down this way, especially if you're a beginner, you don't have finger strength, the string will also be partially muted. I call it being flush to the fret, just as close as you can to it. And then second, you want to use your fingertips to fret down. In other words, you want to curve your fingers like a 90-degree angle. So if you have longer nails, they're going to get in the way. But if you want to use your fingertips so your fingers don't lean on other strings. And if you keep those two tips in mind, that's a good start. Now what we're going to do is go back to the first note. We're going to put the 2 notes together in a D chord. Now for the next note, that'll involve the 3rd finger going on the 2nd string 3rd fret. And now we sort of reset everything. Now that you know what you need to do, get that first finger back to the 3rd string 2nd fret, and then kind of adjust the hand so both fingers are close to the frets. And then we're going to drag that thumb across 3 strings now, starting with the 4th. Finally, we're going to take our middle finger. We're going to complete the chord, but let's get that note first. Middle finger on the 1st string 2nd fret. That's how that last note should sound. And now we get our fingers in position. And if we look at the chord diagram, they should resemble that V shape, the upside down triangle shape. And then we play the 4 strings going across. That's the goal. Now I guarantee you, if you're an absolute beginner, you're not getting clarity right now. It's easy for me to say what to do, but it's going to take a while, again, especially if you're an absolute beginner, to develop that finger strength. Also, the proper technique of curving your fingers using the fingertips. So one bit of advice is when you're working on playing this chord, these 4 strings, you want to look at it like you're building a house. You want to get a good foundation first before you worry about the next floor. What I mean is, get that first note to ring first before you worry about going ahead. Now, that won't be an issue. The second note, which is the 3rd string, putting those 2 shouldn't be an issue. But as we start to move up the strings, you may have a challenge there in getting maybe that next string to sound, which is the 2nd string. Here's what typically may happen. Clarity, clarity, no clarity. Well, you don't want to go ahead. Say you do this. Well, that's cheating. You got the last one to sound, but the one before it didn't sound good. What you want to do is you want to play through this chord slowly. That way you can make an adjustment. Here's what I mean. Okay, okay, not good. Make an adjustment. Once you get the string to ring, reset, and then move on to that final string. And most likely, there's going to be a lot of that early on. And then you make an adjustment. Once you know how to get it to ring, then eventually you'll get that successful D chord, 4 clear sounding notes total. Now at this point in the lesson, those of you who may want to be strumming songs might be asking yourselves, why am I doing this when I'd rather be doing this? Strumming away. Believe it or not, the strumming technique is actually less challenging than playing each individual note. But the thing is, when it comes to learning chords, the best way to initially learn a chord is to learn to play them as arpeggios. And arpeggios are what we've been doing with the D chord, playing the individual notes or strings and focusing on clarity. Down the road, when you start strumming, that means your strum chords will sound better. Also, for those of you who want to do fingerstyle, where you're going to need clarity from all the strings anyways, so that first step is to focus on getting clarity. And that focus should be more on the left hand, the fretting hand, as opposed to the right strumming hand. Why I'm bringing that up is a lot of beginners. You're motivated to learn guitar, and sometimes that motivation, that effort, comes out more in the plucking hand, the right hand, than the fretting hand. You need to really put that energy into the fretting hand, pressing down hard against the strings. That's where you're going to get your clarity. Your volume comes from this hand. Your clarity comes from your fretting hand. And let me just give an example. Sometimes a beginner, they're trying really hard, but they're not putting enough pressure with the left hand, and it sounds like this. The thumb gets sore, and you get no progress because the focus should instead be on pressure with that left hand, and then maybe being a little bit more relaxed with that right hand. And that's the focus on clarity, is applying more pressure with the left hand, less pressure with the right. Next, we're going to learn how to play a G chord. And for those of you looking at the chord diagram, you may see that we are going to play all 6 strings. We're going to be fretting 3 strings, but we also have 3 open strings in between. But let's break it down 1 string at a time, starting with the bass note. The bass note is always the first lowest note you play in a chord. In this case, we're going to have our middle finger on that 6th string, 3rd fret. Then, right next to it, and if you look at my finger and also kind of compare it to the chord diagram, you'll see that first finger is on the 5th string, 2nd fret. And if we played the arpeggio, starting with just the 2 notes, and then we have 3 consecutive open strings. And then finally, we're going to have our 3rd finger on the top string, 3rd fret. Now, you may think it's a little challenging playing all 6 strings, but it's really not that bad. one challenge with the G chord will be that fifth string, and it's not that important. Really important to get those open strings to ring clear in the top string and the bass note. That fifth string can be a real challenge, especially for beginners. If you can get all six, even better. But that's the objective with the G chord. 6 clear sounding strings. Remember, 3 open and 3 strings fretted. Next, we'll show how to play a C chord. A C chord will be 5 total strings. If you're looking at the chord diagram, you'll notice that the 6th string has an X above it. And so we're going to start with the 5th string with our 3rd finger on the 5th string 3rd fret. Right next to that, we'll place our middle finger down on the 4th string 2nd fret. Then we move to the 3rd string open. So again, we want to have those, use our fingertips a little bit so we're not muting strings, and if we can get, that's a good start. Then our 1st finger is going to go down on the 2nd string 1st fret. Now I've been playing a while, so I'm sort of naturally shifting into the chord. A lot of times, once you learn a new string, you need to adjust your hand once you know what to do, so it's a little bit more comfortable. Again, you want your fingers along the frets. So a lot of times when you learn a new string, you make an adjustment with the hand so everything falls into place. But let's get those first 4 notes on the C chord. And last but not least, top string open. Another sort of a typical challenge on the C chord is having the 1st finger sometimes lean a little bit and mute that 1st string. So using the tip of that 1st finger will prevent it from leaning on that top string, and you'll get clarity. Here's a C chord arpeggio. And let's do it one more time. At this point in the lesson, it's a good idea to review the 3 chords we've covered so far. Make sure we have a good foundation before we go ahead with the remaining chords. And just to let you know, if you are a beginner, it's one thing on my end to just show you how to get a clear sounding arpeggio, but it typically takes a beginner at least a week to get all 3 chords, all 3 arpeggios to sound clearly. So don't feel bad if it's going to take you a while. It's one thing to know how to do it, but to actually get the finger strength down, it may take a while. Here's what we're going to do in the next clip. A quick review of how all 3 arpeggios should sound. We'll do 3 arpeggios of each. We'll do 3 Ds, 3 Gs, and 3 C chords. For an E chord, we play all 6 strings, so the bottom string will be open and the top 2 strings will be open. Here's how the E arpeggio will sound. And we'll do 2 more. For an A chord, you actually have three different options on how to fret the notes. And the reason being is if you look at the chord diagram, you'll see the three fretted notes all along the second fret. Well, it's impossible to get the fingers, all three of them, flush to the second fret for an A chord. So with that, we have variations, alterations you have to make. One of the fingers or two of them won't be flush to the fret. We're going to show you the one that I prefer the most. And with this fretting, we're going to start with our middle finger on the 4th string 2nd fret. And then we're going to skip over a string and have that 3rd finger down, also on the 2nd fret, but the 2nd string. For this version, we have 2 fingers flush to the fret. The 1st finger now will be placed in between the 2 fingers on that 3rd string. It's impossible to get it right on the fret, but we sort of tuck it in there. Most likely it'll be almost halfway in between the frets, but at least we have 2 flush to the fret. And then for an A chord, it's going to be 5 total strings. 5th string will be open, and then we move across the arpeggio. And we'll do that one again. Now this is my preferred chord voicing or way to play this A chord. I initially learned an A chord the way most people do, but that's with a different running order with the fingers. This time it'll be 1, 2, and 3. 1st, 2nd, 3rd fingers. And you'll note that the 1st finger now with this voicing is not flush to the fret. Neither is the middle finger. And I haven't played this chord in a while. Most likely I'm not going to get clarity, but let's give a shot at this arpeggio here. Now, again, it's kind of easy to memorize, but in time, I realized, oh, maybe if I switch my fingers here, and since I've been playing this version for years, I can get a clear sounding arpeggio. But you'll see a lot of chord diagrams, I'll say to play an A chord like this. There's even other versions where you'll have your 3, 2, and 4 fingers used to play an A chord. But either way, the idea is to get a clear sounding arpeggio from that A chord. Let's do one more. The bass note of a chord is the lowest sounding string played in the chord. And another way to look at it is the total number of strings that make up a chord determine the bass note of the chord. So one example with G. With the G chord, we play all 6 strings. First note, or the total number of strings, 6. Bass note for a G chord, 6th string. For a C chord, the bass note is the 5th string. Bass note. D chord, 4 total strings. Bass note, 4th string. Now the first step is to be able to play a clear sounding arpeggio for each chord. The next step up is to be able to play a clear sounding arpeggio within a timely manner. Because down the road, when it comes time for learning chords, if someone calls off a chord or you see a chord, you don't want to spend too much time figuring out how to play the chord. You just want to get to it right away. And a good way to wrap up this lesson is with the 5 chords, 5-second challenge. And what that is, I call off a certain chord, and the objective is to play a clear sounding arpeggio of that chord within 5 seconds. Now, it may seem a little too fast, but let me give you an example of how the 5-second challenge will work. Let's say, for example, I called off a G chord. Go. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Now if you notice, I waited over 3 seconds to play that arpeggio. It only takes about 1.5 seconds to play the clear sounding arpeggio. The rest of the time is you figuring out how to get there and getting the fingers in position. And so with that, what we're going to do in the upcoming clips is we will do a 5-second challenge, 3 separate clips. We'll do different running orders. And it's a great way for you to get acclimated to see if you really have the chords down. I will actually call off the chord and play them within 5 seconds. So the idea is if you can keep up with those videos, then you know you not only have clear sounding arpeggios, but you can also play them in a reasonably timely manner. C, A, G, D, E, D, C, A, E, G, E, G, C, D, A, Once you have this lesson down, the next step is to work on changing chords with fingerstyle progressions, as well as building your chord vocabulary with basic minor chords. And you can review my Guitar Basics playlist for those lessons. You can also subscribe to Paluzzi Guitar for future video releases.